That is Jonathan Ferguson, the keeper of firearms and artillery at the Royal Armouries Museum in the UK, and I am Dave Jewitt, the host of Loadout, the GameSpot show that delves into pop culture's most iconic weapons. And on today's episode, we're going to be chatting through some of the many and varied shotguns that crop up in our favourite games.
This thing is basically wind up. So crank on the front, literally comedy wind up mechanism. I think if you're using this in a combat situation, I think you have larger problems.
If you like this kind of content, please make sure to subscribe, as we have episodes of Loadout going up every Sunday, and you can already check out our previous episode all about the history and gaming legacy of the shotgun. On top of that, we'll still be showing Jonathan new gaming arsenals every Saturday, so make sure to check out those as well. Right, let's get into the chat. So shotguns are a massive family of firearms, obviously very diverse. And we've seen examples of all of these in video games and movies, but can you take us through what each sort of type of shotgun is?
Yeah, this isn't everything, needless to say. It's what would fit on the table. But so starting from what's furthest away from me there, standard side-by-side double-barrel shotgun. That would be recognisable to someone from the 18th century. They might wonder where the mechanism had gone. It's actually now hidden inside. But same basic configuration, nice wooden stock. By this point, we've got a lever on the top there. Feel free to pick that up and have a look. And it also, breaking the barrels doesn't just open it up to load. It also cocks the thing. And if it has ejectors, it also cocks the ejectors.
So is it a case of pushing that to the side?
Yeah, and then a bit of leverage, which, by the way, is when people saw these off to do nefarious things, it becomes harder to load them.
It's not as easy as games make it out to be, is it? I'm treating everything with sort of kid gloves, because I know the collection is very important.
So, you know, things aren't going to behave in quite the same way, because we're trying to be careful. And then we've got the Remington 870, the archetypal pump-action shotgun, 1950s vintage, pretty much, but it's still around today, still in production. All sorts of different configurations, and of course has been modernised as all other firearms that are still around have been. Plastic furniture, rails. I mean, this is very vanilla. It's got an old-fashioned bead front sight. I don't know if you want to have a look at that. And then a sort of a rib across the top of the action. So it's instinctive aiming still with this. Yeah,
and this, like you said, this one in particular has had quite a life and is replicated in video games as it's very much modernised. Even 2042 has a version of this, just futurised as much as possible. So it's, I suppose, would you consider it long in the tooth when it comes to pop culture?
Yeah, I mean, not in terms of the design in its niche of a pump-action shotgun. It's still as good as you'll get. But in terms of pump-action shotguns being relevant to what happens in real life, not so much. This would be still a self-defense, home defense, sporting, hunting, maybe even practical, manually operated sporting shotgun. And perhaps you might still use a version for blowing off door hinges. I can't see it in 2042, but you know, it has the advantage of manual operation, so you don't have to rely on a mechanism and therefore enough oomph, to use a technical term, from the cartridge to actually cycle it, because you're doing all the cycling with your own muscles. So it will always have that advantage.
And that's something you've brought up when we've talked about the Spaz 12, when we've been doing expert reacts, the fact that this is both pump action and semi-automatic. The pump action was for using those low power loads, but that's another one of the things that games sort of dance around, whereas usually, if it was just buckshot, chances are you'd be using it semi-automatic. But games quite often go one of two ways, and it's like, no, this is a pump action shotgun, or this is a semi-automatic shotgun.
Yeah.
But this one also has its, I suppose, its own pop culture lineage, and we've talked about it before, but being like heavily influencing the pulse rifle in Aliens. This one to me speaks more sci-fi because of Aliens, Terminator 2.
Totally.
Things like that.
And it just looks more sci-fi. I mean, nothing. I guess as a a spin-off of that hybrid mechanism. Pump, not that many shotguns do, pump or semi. That gives you this very blocky, heavily vented forend that just makes it look way more sci-fi.
Oh goodness.
And then one with a big internal, is it a big internal revolving drum?
Yeah.
Of the striker. That is, I remember when I saw that in a video game for the first time, I was like, I don't know if that's a real thing. And then you go and look it up and you're like, oh, it is in fact. But that's also a very interesting one. But we don't see this mechanism in shotguns too much at all, do we?
No.
And it's very much again, it's something we've talked about in Expo Reacts, reloading this thing on like Battlefield 4, and they're doing it way faster than I think is really accepted as a human being could do. Because really it's not, if this run's empty and you're in a combat situation, I can't imagine trying to thumb all those in is going to be an enjoyable experience.
I think if you're using this in a combat situation, I think you have larger problems. It's nice try, but it's funny how we're getting maybe less reliable and less practical as we go across the table. So interesting idea to try and marry the single action. Well, not really single action. So I can actually sort of demonstrate a bit of how this works. So this is the protector / striker. This thing is basically wind up. So crank on the front, literally comedy wind up mechanism.
Doesn't play a song, annoyingly.
No, I won't wind it all the way. And then a loading gate on the back, very much like a single action revolver. Flip that up, just a little bit of sheet metal. Shove in your cartridge, one at a time, and then you would actually have to use the trigger to kadunk it to the next slot. And then if you had empty fired cases in there, by the way, you're also having to use a single action revolver style ejector rod.
Oh. And you'd have to turn that each time as well.
Yeah, then your fresh one goes in, then you clonk it round again, knock out the case, shove in the fresh one until you have clunked it all the way round. Then you can close that up and you're ready to shoot. Making sure that you have enough turns on the clock spring to actually work reliably for all of those shots. So interesting idea, Armsil, but maybe not that practical.
Again, it's one of those weapons that I think its life in video games so ridiculously outweighs its life in the real world. Like it's not a hugely common shotgun in video games, but
even so,
yeah. I think the USAS 12 is sort of similar, but I think this one has its niche of, like we've talked about the shotgun niche of big, powerful, and this one has like the big chunky lines to it. It's very sort of intense looking, and I think because of that, a lot of games sort of lean towards it as well. But this is an example of a magazine-fed one, right?
Yeah. So I think of this as a cartoon M16. So it does come with the option for a box magazine as well. But of course, we typically encounter it with, well, not always actually, but usually with the drum, which inherently makes it less reliable. You're better off with any box magazine fed shotgun, and they are becoming maybe more of a thing now for sort of practical shooting competitions. Although most competitors are still using tube magazines. They lend themselves better to the shotgun format. Apart from anything else, you can only fit so many rounds in a massive long extendo mag.
Yeah.
But this does have the drum, and then it has the sort of AR-15 ergonomics. This entire lower section is designed to ape the selector safety, the trigger mechanism, the pistol grip. It's even got like a giant M16 type dust cover, huge carry handle reminiscent of the old M16A1. It's even got the same rear sight arrangement, albeit with slightly different sight. So yeah, and it ejects, can be set up to eject out of the left side, which is an early example of ambidexterity.
Yeah.
And also the cocking handle can be swapped to the other side. This is South Korean, by the way, the USAS 12 or USAS 12.
I think anyone who's played Battlefield will still have bad memories of people shooting frag rounds
Oh yeah.
out of this thing.
Yeah, I do actually.
Yeah.
It's all coming back.
It's not good. It's a dark place, we won't go there. Thank you so much for watching this week's episode of Loadout. If you enjoyed it, please do like the video and subscribe, and maybe even let me know in the comment section down below or on Twitter @IrregularDave what you'd like to see an episode on. If you want more video game firearms content, you can watch the previous series of this show, or check out our weekly series of Expert Reacts, where I show our friends at the Royal Armouries a slew of guns to break down. Next week on Loadout.
Using a silver sword would be about as much good as trying to fight someone with a stick of licorice.
Until next time, I've been your host Dave Jewitt. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.